And staying with tech, South Africa's communication service providers are unanimous that 5G will be a key enabler of the fourth industrial revolution. This is a core finding of a new study by World Wide Worx released today. The study is based on interviews with the country's 4 major mobile network operators and 21 internet and communication service providers. Joining me now for a chat is Arthur Goldstuck, MD of World Wide Worx. Welcome firstly, and what is auction spectrum? It's certainly been making the headlines, Arthur.
Indeed, Hugo. Thank you very much. The real issue here is that the mobile network operators have for many years been trying to provide us with 3G and 4G signals, that is internet access via our cell phones, but using spectrum that was initially given to them back in around 2005. So the only spectrum that they've been given to play with is that is appropriate for 3G, but can be what they call reformed for 4G. And that means that they've got to play various engineering tricks and use fairly expensive equipment to try to deliver 4G signals. They've done that quite successfully, but at a very high cost. And that's one of the factors that has held the cost of mobile data fairly high. Now 5G is arriving. They're rolling out 5G services, but again, on a very limited basis, because the spectrum that is ideal for 5G hasn't been allocated by ICASA. In fact, we haven't had spectrum allocated on a broad basis since 2005.
Now, how will it transform the sector?
So there's a few things that it'll do. One is that it will allow operators to provide high-speed signals to far more people at far higher quality. So, for example, the same tower that would give a certain amount of people access to a certain speed via their cell phones or via mobile data will give 10 times as many people 10 times as much speed. That's a rough equation.
So when we talk about speed, sorry, Arthur, when we talk about speed, I presume we're talking about data services primarily.
Correct. So the current data speeds on 3G, you typically get up to around 15, 20 megs per second if you have a really strong signal. With 4G, you're getting up to around 50, even 60 megabits per second if you have a really good signal. With 5G, it starts at 100 megs per second on a good signal, up to 1 gigabit per second. And the potential is even faster. But what's important there is that it gives more people access to that spectrum or to those kinds of speeds at a far higher quality. So what you are getting for utilizing the same amount of spectrum, but the new spectrum, is a transformation in the communications ability of people, of businesses, and so on. And the other side of that equation is that 5G makes a huge amount of services possible that at the moment are just theoretical, where you need very quick response time in that service. With 4G, you get a fairly quick response time, but you couldn't, for example, introduce instant signals to a car to stop it in time when it detects an obstacle in front of it. 5G will allow for that kind of instant reaction. That's, again, a hypothetical example. A really good example that is becoming a reality is remote surgery, where you really do need instant response time. You can't have a lag in the signal. 3G and 4G still has quite a lag when it's at a long distance. With 5G, that lag gets cut down significantly, and you can suddenly do these incredible things that seem like science fiction and really can transform many sectors of society.
Now, Arthur, all that is very exciting, but obviously there are a number of challenges around the spectrum. I mean, there are a number of lawsuits that have been thrown at ICASA.
Both Telkom and MTN have gone to court to try to stop ICASA from going ahead with the spectrum auction, because they believe that it doesn't allow them to be competitive enough, and it doesn't give them the right amount of spectrum they need to roll out these kinds of services. And in fact, in our report, one of the things that we indicated was essential was that the cost of the spectrum should be reasonable, but also that there should be big enough blocks of spectrum, chunks of spectrum, because it comes in a kind of a chunk or a block. And they talk about contiguous spectrum. There's spectrum that's pieces of spectrum that are next to each other. That allows for far more efficient use of spectrum. And what ICASA is doing is slicing it up into small pieces that does away with that absolute essential requirement of contiguous spectrum.
Now let's talk about the average person on the street and obviously the cost of data. I mean, at the moment, it's astronomical. What are the benefits on that front?
So the benefits of 5G on that level are similar to the benefits of generally allocating spectrum, regardless of which spectrum it is, because the more spectrum that is allocated to the operators, the less costly it will be for them to try to meet the needs of all their customers. At the moment, they're having to bend over backwards, really almost bend the rules of physics to try to make the existing spectrum work for all their customers. So it's actually almost miraculous when we do experience high-speed signals via mobile data. And this will allow them to do that far more efficiently and cost-effectively, and that should bring down the cost of data. I would have said to ICASA, don't even auction off the spectrum, allocate it on a certain basis at no cost. But then part of the deal would be that the cost of data has to come down significantly.
And I suppose the reach as well will increase, allowing people in more remote parts of the country to have access to the internet and data.
In truth, the existing 3G and 4G technology should provide that service. In fact, we have something like 98% coverage of the country with mobile data signals. The problem with a lot of that is that the signals are very weak. They don't extend into deep rural areas and the like. And 5G isn't going to solve that particular problem. But we certainly need to make quality fast 5G available to people who do live in urban areas where they can make use of that internet access in a way that makes them more economically enabled, more economically powerful.
Arthur Goldsuck, thank you so much for speaking to us. And as we move on, the State of the Nation address outlined key economic reforms which are needed to get South Africa out of the slump.